This hour of the Costa Report is brought to you by IBM. Big data at the speed of business.
Welcome to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and thank you for joining me for another 2 hours of Straight Talk Radio. I want to welcome members of our military, especially those serving us overseas and are tuning in over the internet today. Thank you for taking time to be with us. In just a moment, the CEO of RAND Corporation, Mr. Michael Rich, will be joining us. And as you know, the RAND Corporation is one of our premier think tanks, which provides primary research not only to the United States government, but also to foreign countries to help forge policy based on facts rather than politics and unsubstantiated beliefs, a cause to which this radio program is also devoted. But before Mr. Rich joins us, as is my custom each week, let me tell you a little about his background. Michael Rich is the son of aerospace pioneer Ben Rich, who worked in Lockheed Martin's legendary Skunk Works developing the Nighthawk stealth fighter. Rich, a native of Los Angeles, received his undergraduate degree from the University of California at Berkeley and his law degree from UCLA. While at UCLA, Mr. Rich joined the RAND Corporation as a summer associate and upon graduation became a full-time member of the company's research team. He rose to the top the hard way. He was largely admired for his unwavering commitment to objective analysis, his insightful interpretation of the data, and his ability to present information in a way that was meaningful in shaping public policy. Mr. Rich served as the Vice President of RAND's National Security Division and is credited with the company's work in the Middle East following the Cold War. He was responsible for the federally funded Research Center, which provides critical information to the Secretary of Defense as well as military and intelligence agencies. In 2011, Mr. Rich became RAND Corporation's president and CEO. And today, in addition to being a member of the faculty of the Pardee RAND Graduate School, the world's largest PhD program in public policy, he's also a board member of the Council for Aid to Education and several other education, health, and policy organizations. And wherever Mr. Rich goes, the value of putting empirical data ahead of dogma and private agendas is his foremost objective. It's my pleasure to welcome to the Costa Report a powerful voice in shaping public policy at home and abroad, Mr. Michael Rich. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Rich.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for that kind introduction.
So for listeners who are not familiar with the RAND Corporation, perhaps we could start by explaining what the company does and who it serves.
Well, Rebecca, RAND is a nonprofit research organization, and its mission is to help improve policy and decision-making through research and analysis. As you pointed out, we're strictly nonpartisan, and that means we believe that facts, evidence, and science should drive debates about policy, not anecdotes or partisan rhetoric. We were established now just over 65 years ago, so we're in our 7th decade. Our initial focus was defense and national security matters, and that is still an area of considerable strength for us. It's about half of what we do. But long ago, we diversified, and today we specialize in more than a dozen broad policy areas: health, education, energy, transportation, international affairs. I'm just naming a few. And plus, as you pointed out, we operate a world-class PhD program, in fact, the largest doctoral program in the field of public policy, the Pardee RAND Graduate School. To give you a sense of size, we have about 2,000 employees, nearly 2,000 employees who come from more than 50 countries. They speak dozens of different languages. We publish about 1,000 reports, articles, commentaries each year. And because we're dedicated to the public interest, our work is available for free in full online. And last year, I think we had about 8 million downloads from our website, rand.org, of our various research publications. So in a nutshell, nonprofit, nonpartisan, mission-driven, and the reputation of RAND and the brand name is built on trust, and the trust comes from the quality and objectivity of our research, and those are our two core values.
Now, I know that sometimes there's a big gap between perception and reality, so I want to state again that the RAND Corporation is nonpartisan, and I think that's a very important point, because depending on what your research reveals, you must have to fight the perception that the study is skewed in some way towards the left or the right, particularly given how polarized the country has become in recent years. So how is it possible with so much data and information at our fingertips that we've become so polarized? You would think that all this data would make decision making more rational, wouldn't you?
You definitely would, but Rebecca, you're exactly right. The country has become more polarized, and in particular, the public discourse has become increasingly polarized. I think everybody has their sort of favorite illustrations of this. You know, for me, it's it comes from the Supreme Court Associate Justice nomination process, which used to be a fairly straightforward process of a president picking a distinguished jurist, usually, or public official to become a Supreme Court justice. And as recently as 1993, just 20 years ago, when President Clinton had an opportunity to nominate his first justice, it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she was confirmed by a vote of 96-3. In fact, more than 90% of the Republicans voted in favor of her nominations. And for the most part, confirmation of justices has been a nonpartisan matter. But then, I think about 10 or 12 years later, when President George W. Bush nominated Samuel Alito, 90% of Democrats voted no. And then 88% of Republicans voted against President Obama's nomination of Elena Kagan just 4 years after that. And so that's just one indication of how polarized we are. There's quite a bit of research. Rand has done some of the research on the reasons for polarization, and it's complex, and I don't think people understand all the reasons. But certainly part of it is actually that people are sorting themselves geographically, and we have more and more clusters of like-minded people. And of course, now there's the availability of information channels that cater directly to somebody's own particular beliefs and partisan views. So in my view, organizations like RAND committed to looking at the facts and developing objective analyses of the facts, deriving recommendations from those facts, they're more and more important as time goes on.
I think you'd agree it's not just the nomination of justices. It's anybody that the president puts before the House and Senate.
That's correct, and it seems to be.
I mean, they've all become political footballs.
It certainly seems that way, and it seems to be true no matter who the president is or
yes.
which party controls the Senate.
That's right. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I've got 2 children, and when they used to get into a fight in the back of the car, I didn't really care who started it.
Right. I have 2 myself, so I'm very familiar with that.
That's right. They both got sent to their room.
Now, you know, what I think both of us would also concede, though, that the problems we're dealing with are complex today, and
yes.
They're difficult to solve. So it's not that solutions to some of our biggest problems are directly at hand either, but progress does seem to be slower when the discourse and the debate is so polarized. But
that's true. That's true. But, you know, even though the problems are much more complex and multifaceted, we do have to remember that you have to still try to make progress. You have to put some proposal, some plan, and accept the fact that there's probably going to be flaws in it, but you work those flaws out as you move forward. And I think that we are spending so much of our time looking for what is wrong with every bill, with every nominee, with every program that's put forward, and then having the media harp on what is wrong is not been very helpful. It's my definition of gridlock. If you're only looking for what's wrong, you're not going to be able to get anything through. And I think that that's what you were speaking toward. Now we have to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the impact RAND has had in the Middle East. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Did you know that every day we create 2.5 quintillion bytes of data, and that 90% of the data in the world today has been created in the last 2 years alone? This data comes from everywhere and it affects everyone. This data is big data. Big data is all data, and it's more than simply a matter of size. Big data represents an opportunity to uncover new insights, make your business more agile, and answer questions that were previously beyond your reach. IBM's Big Data platform uses sophisticated technologies and patented advanced analytics designed to complement your existing information infrastructure. The IBM Big Data platform allows you to get started quickly today and expand to address more complex problems tomorrow. It doesn't matter where you start, it matters that you start. Find out how IBM can help you turn big data into a competitive advantage by visiting ibm.com/bigdata today.
So here's a question for you. Is life getting easier or harder? Take the last 5 years, for example. Do things feel more complicated, more unwieldy, more unmanageable? If your answer is yes, then you're not alone. Technology is supposed to take care of this, but instead we find ourselves running on a treadmill that's going faster and faster every day. That's why I'm asking you to get a copy of The Watchman's Rattle, the first book that shows how complexity leads to gridlock, a confusion between facts and beliefs, and eventually failure. The Watchman's Rattle is the only book that explains why those who master complexity come out on top in business, in government, and in life. Go to RebeccaCosta.com and order your copy of The Watchman's Rattle now. That's RebeccaCosta.com. Find out why quick changing environments mean quick opportunities for success.
Hi everyone, this is Kay Swirling. MZ and I are quite proud of the station you're listening to. Quite frequently, I meet people who express their appreciation for KSCO, one of the few remaining independent, locally owned radio voices left in our country. Of course this is gratifying, but it's very important that you understand and keep in mind that KSCO is made possible by three things: advertising sales, book, hat, bag, and other KSCO gear sales, and in particular, longevity health product sales. You see, every time somebody in our audience purchases longevity products such as Beyond Tangy Tangerine or the Healthy Start Pack, that person is directly supporting our operation and making it possible for us to continue to serve our community. We feel good about recommending these products because they are of the highest quality and they do work. I know, because I take these products every day and I can enthusiastically vouch for their goodness and effectiveness. I first heard Dr. Wallach's message about taking charge of your health through nutrition nearly 20 years ago. I strongly believe in nutritional supplementation over toxic prescription drugs and invite you to help yourself and help KSCO and KOMY by trying and using these products as I do. Visit kscoteam.com or kscohealth.com or call one of your local longevity distributors. For KSCO and KOMY, this is Kay Swirling.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today is the president and CEO of the RAND Corporation, Mr. Michael Rich. And before the break, we were talking about how complex and global the problems we face have become, and how that's often led to looking for what's flawed with a proposal or even a Supreme Court justice nominee. Is that right?
Correct.
So there have to be times when your research turns up very different results from what your client was anticipating. Can you give us an example of a case where the results of your work had an unexpected impact on domestic policy or a decision?
Well, sure. In fact, often our research results or the findings surprise both sides.
Yes.
I think the first time I remember this happening was back in the middle 1960s when the Congress was considering the idea of medical savings accounts. And actually both the Democrats and the Republicans had concerns about it. And the RAND analysis showed that neither set of concerns was well founded, and that broke the impasse, and of course we now have medical savings accounts. But perhaps the most contentious and possibly surprising result that I can remember was on the issue of mandatory minimum drug sentencing. Sometime around 15 years ago, federal law was enacted that required a person who was convicted of possessing half a kilogram or more of cocaine, required that he or she be sentenced to at least 5 years in prison. And actually that law had a broad bipartisan support. But it turned out when you analyzed it carefully, the mandatory minimum sentences just simply were not justifiable on the basis of cost effectiveness. If your interest was either reducing cocaine consumption or the expenditures on cocaine or even drug-related crime, the costs of incarceration were just too high, and other sentencing regimes were just more cost effective, a better use of taxpayer dollars. And so when you look at the facts and you try to analyze them objectively, you need to be prepared for surprising solutions. In fact, when I began my career at RAND, my very first mentor, an economist who worked here by the name of Nancy Nimitz, that was her slogan, prepare to be surprised. Don't form a conclusion on an issue until you've collected all the data, analyzed it with all the available techniques, then draw a conclusion. But until then, prepare to be surprised.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I think that every research project, you have to be prepared to find something in there that was unexpected. And if you aren't doing that, then you've probably biased the research in some way to go looking for what you were hoping to find. And I think that with clients, they're always hiring research organizations to help buttress a particular assumption that they have. I found that to be true over the years. And it's always difficult and tricky to come back and say, well, actually, that isn't what we found.
Yeah, you have to develop a thick skin if you have that aspiration, which we do.
That's right. Oh, if it's okay with you, I'd like to move on to the Middle East, where RAND has a shining example of the impact fact-based policy and reforms can have on stabilization. So can you tell us a little bit about your work in Jordan? I believe RAND was asked to help the government at a time when thousands of Syrians were crossing into Jordan, and it looked like it could be a very unstable situation.
Well, it continues to be a challenge not only for Jordan but for Lebanon. The Syria conflict is already a huge humanitarian disaster, and there's obviously little sign that there's going to be relief in the near future. It's a real tragedy, and of course the burdens are falling on nations that are not well equipped in terms of resources and infrastructure. RAND's work in the Middle East actually goes back to the very beginning of the institution, but initially our research was on or about the Middle East for American government clients who needed to know about developments and receive recommendations about policies. But about 10 years ago, now a little bit more than 10 years ago, we came upon some opportunities to actually perform research for decision makers in the Middle East. And we now work for a variety of different countries interested in reforming policies and programs, including both Arab countries as well as Israel, and hopefully in the near future Turkey as well. But maybe the best example that I can think of ongoing work involves the Kurdistan region of Iraq, which has a very, I think, forward-looking approach to devising public policies, particularly social policies, what we would call elementary and secondary education, primary delivery of primary health care, and they're particularly interested in creating the structure and the incentives and the programs to permit the growth of the private sector, which has been underdeveloped, was underdeveloped in Saddam Hussein's Iraq. And so we have now a several-year long effort helping the Minister of Planning and the Prime Minister develop policies and procedures to improve the education system, improve the delivery of health care, and build a fact-based policy formulation capability.
Now, do you think there is a blueprint being created that can also migrate to Afghanistan? Because we're getting ready to pull out of Afghanistan, and as you know, they have not had sufficient time to build up an economy, to build up infrastructure. So there has to be some plan there for the country to stand on its own 2 feet, or we've effectively opened the door for terrorism to come back in.
It's a very tall order. I think there are some common elements that countries wishing to modernize can follow. We've recently started work in Mongolia that follows some of the same a path that we've followed in other countries. But of course, you have to customize the analysis and the recommendations for the particular setting.
But you would think if you have one shining example, for example, Jordan, which avoided the Arab Spring, avoided turmoil, effected reforms in a very managed and controlled way. You would think that if Rand Corporation has one great example in the Middle East, you would have others wanting to replicate that, no?
Well, that's certainly what everybody is hoping for, and depending on what month, there seems to be good or promising news from various places. And now I think some of the events and developments in Tunisia are ones that seem promising. But this is a long-term and fragile process of evolution and development, and won't necessarily see progress in a straight line, but rather a jagged line.
Well, what has your research told us about the Arab Spring? We have to go to break here very shortly, but did that decrease the threat to the United States, increase the threat? Is there any research to indicate that?
I think it hasn't been very long since the developments that are known as the Arab Spring, and there's differences amongst academics and scholars about that. But my own sense is that over the long term, the developments are going to be positive, but we're going to have to be patient.
That's a good way to end this segment. Patience. We don't have enough of that. All right, we're going to take another break. Stay right where you are. We'll be right back with Michael Rich. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Do you love creating salads as much as you enjoy eating them? Hi, I'm Amy Tobin, cookbook author and culinary expert. Dole inspires fresh and wholesome dishes for any meal with their wide selection of salad blends and all-natural salad kits. From the mild and tender texture of sweet butter lettuce to the crunch of classic romaine sprinkled with colorful shredded carrots and red cabbage, Dole has over 30 salad blends to satisfy every palate. If you're looking for the ultimate in convenience, try Dole's unique salad kit combinations that include farm-fresh lettuces and vegetables, mouth-watering all-natural toppings, and specially made dressings. It's all you need to make a distinctively delicious salad. The possibilities are endless. Visit www.dolesalads.com for recipes and other ideas to feed your culinary imagination.
Folks, Michael Olson here at Santa Cruz Electronics, where doing it yourself is going to a whole new level. Just witnessed cutting-edge technology CNC milling machine. John Bowers, what does this machine do?
It whittles away material from whatever it is you're working with and removes everything until you get to the shape of the part that you want.
Just saw John mill out his own wrench from a chunk of material. He put a computer program in, turned the machine on. The machine said, "Yes, John, here's your wrench." This is a game changer technology.
It certainly is. It actually allows you and I and other folks to be able to do small-scale manufacturing right out of their garage.
Come down here to Santa Cruz Electronics on Soquel Avenue and get a demonstration, learn how to do it.
It's great fun and can be rewarding, too.
Come and look at it. Right here at Santa Cruz Electronics.
2808 Soquel Avenue.
It's a CNC milling machine. Dream up a widget in the morning and have it done in the afternoon and put it on eBay at night, just like that, right, John?
You bet.
They say we spend $25 billion a year sweating it out at the gym. Sweat contains some of the essential nutrients your body needs to grow strong and stay healthy. If you sweat these nutrients out and fail to replace them, your body will begin breaking down. Some say you can get all 90 of the essential nutrients from the foods you eat. Maybe, but if you eat foods from farmed out soils or foods that have had the life processed out of them, you will deprive your body of some essential nutrients. You can get all 90 of the essential nutrients your body needs for less than a daily latte with a 90 for Life Healthy Start Pack. It's easy, it's delicious, and they are essential.
ACE is the place to pick up Dr. Joel Wallach's 90 for Life Healthy Start Pack. Swing by Ace Hardware in Freedom, Gilroy, Marina, Salinas, and Watsonville and ask for the 90 for Life. You'll get all the nutrients your body needs to grow strong and stay healthy for less than a daily latte. Remember, ACE is your place for the 90 for Life.
Hi, I'm Pamela Fugit-Hetrick, the host of Money Moves. Cash flows and money moves, but do you find money moving out of your wallet faster than it comes in? Do you wish you had a personal money manager? Do your best Dirty Harry imitation.
You've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk? Go ahead. Make my day.
Pretend that your finger is your gun. Quick draw, aim, point, and straight ahead. Notice that one finger is pointing out, but you have at least 3 pointing back at you. You're the best person to manage your own money. To get the tools you need for the job, listen to Money Moves Thursday night from 7 to 8 p.m. As your host, I promise that each week, Money Moves will leave you with some tips and tools to help you manage your own money. Thursday nights, 7 p.m. for Money Moves. Remember, that's Thursday nights, 7 p.m. for Money Moves.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and if you're just joining us, my guest is Michael Rich. Now, you've been at this since you were in college, and so I suspect it isn't difficult to separate symptoms from the actual disease. You must see some macro causes that instigate or aggravate social issues, issues like exploding population growth, for example, which many experts claim is the cause of massive unemployment, deteriorating healthcare, education, and infrastructure in countries where the Arab Spring occurred. So, in your view, are we in danger of focusing too much on symptoms and then sidestepping these larger root causes?
Well, I think that's many times a danger in many different policy areas, and I think you're astute to put your finger on it here in this case. And so I think the answer is correct. And I think that's why some of the more forward-looking countries are focused on human capital development, education, the development of workforce capabilities, and so on. That's one of the longest sets of capabilities to develop. The education system in countries is one of the hardest and most time-consuming to improve and strengthen, and it's an appropriate place to put some initial effort. But when we, going back to your earlier question about how to respond to the Arab Spring, we have a lot of historical examples of similar kinds of developments in Africa and Latin America and so on. There are some lessons from that. Mm-hmm. One, I think, is that militaries will need to be subordinated to civilian authorities. That's been a key to success in other important and successful transitions. The other important, I think, factor is political inclusiveness. That can help stabilize a transition, including all important factions, movements, and where relevant ethnic groups in a transitional governing arrangement. That's important. Economic problems sometimes complicate transitions, but in the past they haven't derailed rebuild democratization. So most of the effort, I think, from the outside needs to help support institutional reform and in particular build civil society, because many of the countries undergoing these transformations have had things that we take for granted as the pillars of civil society, private organizations, labor unions, whatever, those kinds of non-governmental organizations and traditions. Sometimes they're religious institutions. Those have been eviscerated in some of these long-time dictatorships. Those have to rebuild and often can be rebuilt with support from outside.
Yeah, if we get the disease wrong, we're going to get the cure wrong. And it's shocking to me how often we think the problem was whether they had a dictatorial government or a democracy. Democracy in and of itself isn't going to create employment, create a valuable economy. Nothing has changed for the person on the street in Egypt or Libya or Tunisia. And those kinds of changes, as you pointed out in the earlier segment, you have to be patient and you have to be willing to invest in infrastructure. We now know that the largest migration of human beings ever in the history of humankind is taking place right now from rural areas into urban areas. And this explains a lot of the unrest and a lot of the issues that these urban areas are facing right now, including perhaps the Arab Spring. So I get concerned that government leaders, the media in particular, seem to focus on these symptoms, and we go to cure the symptom, but we're just putting a Band-Aid on a cancer patient. I mean, we're not really getting to the root cause of these issues.
Well, your focus on urbanization is exactly right on target. And one of the complicating factors, in addition to overtaxing insufficient infrastructure in urban areas around the world, is that most of them are on coastlines.
Yes.
And those coastlines, of course, are getting increasingly vulnerable as sea levels are rising. And so pretty soon we'll have an overlay of another environmentally related challenge for these large and burgeoning urban areas.
I guess when we're talking about the coastal areas, for example, the climate change, which we're experiencing right here in the United States right now, despite a lot of denial, that changes water tables, it changes agriculture. These are multifaceted, extremely complex problems, and we seem to put a lot of quick elixirs in front of the public and call it a day. How do we get around that? How do we educate the public so that when they go in to vote, for example, in ballots in the United States, in their local precincts, their local areas, that they'll be more educated? And I guess my second follow-on question is, are we informed enough to even vote?
Well, you've picked one of the most complicated policy issues.
Well, they must have told you it
table.
wasn't going to be easy to have this conversation
No,
today.
it's a good one to
Yeah.
I think to focus on. The climate change, the science of that is clear to many people. But there are some important holdouts as well, and whether the climate is truly changing, and if it is, what is causing it. Those are two of the most contentious questions on the policy landscape. But, I believe that both sides have one thing in common. The actual effects of policies we choose today and policies that are being advocated by one side or another, it really aren't going to be known for a generation or more. And so at RAND, we've addressed that challenge by asking, how do you fashion a policy in the near term when you won't know its effects for a long time?
There you go.
And that quandary has led us to develop a number of techniques for devising policies that we use the term are robust. And by that we mean they're not optimized for a particular specific future scenario, which may or may not turn out to be the actual scenario, but which are good for the vast majority of plausible scenarios and disastrous for very few. In other words, how do you minimize changes or policy choices that we will regret tomorrow? And that's been our focus. There actually is quite a bit of objective research. I mentioned we publish 1,000 different products a year, and our challenge is to make them more and more accessible. So we post everything for free in full on our website. We have newsletters people can follow, increasingly using social media. And we know that more and more people are turning to this kind of research, and so we're hoping to play a small but growing role in the kind of education that you're talking about.
Well, I have to say that it's one of my favorite sources, and everyone that I work with is very appreciative of the work that the RAND Corporation does. Let me ask you this before we have to go to break here. Based on what you know about threats to the United States or even threats to the planet, what research keeps you awake at night?
Well, it seems like there's no shortage of concerns and dangers, but one thing I think to be worried about is the proliferation of what some people call ungoverned territories, large areas of land that are not controlled by any organized government. And those kinds of territories, those areas could be breeding grounds or sanctuaries for extremists. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the challenges we'll be wrestling with for a long time. But some of the other matters that you've talked about, rapid urbanization, the lack of access to modern education, and so on, are also things that are potentially in the medium and long-term threats to the United States and our allies and friends as well.
When you talk about ungoverned territories, can you give us a quick example?
Well, the one that is most commonly in the news are some of the areas in northwestern Pakistan. Mm-hmm. But now increasingly there are some in Africa as well, and I think one of the concerns is the fallout from the conflict in Syria means that there are now large swaths of that country that really don't have an organized government authority to mm-hmm. allow economic progress to
We have
to
to take our last scheduled break. We'll be right back with Michael Rich. You're listening to the Costa Report.
"50 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech. But something you may not know is that Dr. King was represented by the world's foremost speaking agency, the American Program Bureau. The American Program Bureau has a courageous history of representing luminaries, entertainers, and motivators from all backgrounds. From Ronald Reagan, Richard Branson, and Mikhail Gorbachev to Jon Stewart, Michael Douglas, and Desmond Tutu. From A-list celebrities to best-selling authors, cutting-edge business leaders, and the greatest minds in academia, the American Program Bureau has speakers to fit every venue and every budget. When corporations, conferences, schools, and community organizations need an expert speaker, they turn to the American Program Bureau to help them craft an event that will be remembered long afterwards. To inquire about a speaker for your next engagement, contact the American Program Bureau at 800-225-4575 or visit our website at apbspeakers.com. The American Program Bureau, making history one speech at a time.
Hi, Scott. You know, I was recently traveling and I wanted to buy a thank you gift for my host. And since Caraccioli Wines makes such a nice gift, I found myself wishing there was a way I could get my hands on some.
You know, the best way to get your hands on some is visit us in the tasting room in downtown Carmel or check out the website. And for an occasion, it's always great to give a Magnum. It's an extra little I'm thinking of you gift because you can't get it anywhere. And really, those are the two locations that sell the large format bottle.
Now, can I get a Magnum off of the website?
Yes, you can. And we'll actually ship it right to your doorstep.
Wow. And how long does that take?
You know, we'll have it to you even on the other side of the country on the East Coast in 5 days.
5 days, really? So what can I get a Magnum of?
We have a Magnum in our Brut Cuvée, our Brut Rosé, as well as our Pinot Noir.
And the website again?
That's www.caraccioliCellars.com. That's CaraccioliCellars.com.
Shirt Crafter, your one-stop print shop, has been locally owned and operated in Santa Cruz for a decade, providing custom design services to help you build your brand. ShirtCrafter provides top-of-the-line custom screen printing, digital printing, embroidery, stickers, banners, business cards, and so much more. They carry top-quality brands of gear from T-shirts and polos to sweatshirts and ball caps. Whether you're outfitting your softball team or team building for your business, ShirtCrafter has it all. So build your brand with ShirtCrafter, located at 111 Ingle Street in Santa Cruz, or go to www.shirtcrafter.com. Or you could give them a call at 831-423-0537. That's ShirtCrafter, 831-423-0537.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today is the president and CEO of the Rand Corporation, Michael Rich. As commerce becomes more globalized, corporations seem to have a bigger role to play in these policy decisions. And you've pointed out that they have to make sure that supply chains remain open and their energy needs are met, their employees and patents and brands are all protected. But many Americans are worried that in recent times, business has begun to play too big a role in government. What's your view on that?
I'm still to be honest with you, I'm still forming a view of that. The trade-offs between privacy and security are very complex, and I'm hoping one day we'll help develop some overarching principles for striking that balance. But I think in the meantime, we're going to have to maybe make some choices on a case-by-case basis. But I think it's I hope you and your programs ahead will shine a light so that we have a good and sound, rich public discourse about what the trade-offs ought to be.
It's interesting. I feel the same way you do. I'm of two minds on this. I think some of the discipline that business has those principles would be well applied to running government efficiently. On the other hand, some of the ability to make decisions not simply based on economics but for the greater good, those principles would serve business better. So I think I'd like to see more cross-pollination, not dominance by one or the other.
Well, that's I think you're right on target there. And in fact, increasingly, I think we're seeing the need for more creative combinations of public and private activities in addressing problems. One of the things we're spending an increasing amount of effort and time examining is the subject of how to build community resilience in the face of either natural or man-made disasters. Emergency preparedness takes care of the immediate period after a disaster. And a lot of communities have gotten good. There's obviously lots of room for improvement. But where there's a real need for improvement is the preparedness or the readiness to deal with the long-term consequences of natural disasters. And it's pretty clear from the research we've done that that's not just a public sector or a public agency responsibility. That's going to have to be something that community organizations as well as businesses step up and play a role as well. Defining the respective roles, the way those organizations and sectors work together, that's the big policy challenge, and we're working on that.
You're absolutely right. I'm a first responder for the Red Cross, and after Hurricane Katrina and a couple of other hurricanes that particular year, I can tell you that none of the government FEMA trucks could get down there, but Walmart somehow was able to get their supplies into New Orleans and Pompano Beach, and before we saw any government aid, here came the Walmart trucks.
Yep. Well, ideally, we would know in advance which organizations have which capabilities and be able to adapt a response that takes advantage of the best capabilities. And that's a different way of thinking about things, but it's going to be increasingly necessary as the frequency of these large disasters increases.
Right. And the Red Cross is actually very good at subcontracting to the Walmarts and large hotel chains and things to provide temporary relief. A lot of people are surprised about that, but there is a very good cooperation between a nonprofit and also for-profit businesses. And it seems to work very well in providing services to those that need them. Now, I want to get back to my question about whether Americans are well informed. Recently, I made a confession, and I don't think I got so many emails in all my life. I made a confession that I'm not qualified to vote on the vast majority of ballot measures in California. Because, one, they're worded in a very confusing way. Yes actually means I'm voting no, and no means I'm voting yes. And when I read the initiatives, I realize, well, I haven't researched this well enough. And maybe I'm just over-analytical, and that could very well be my problem. But are we informed enough to be able to make fact-based decisions, or are we contributing to making decisions based on gut feel and unproven beliefs?
Well, I think there's a role for gut feel and instinct. The mission statement of RAND has the word help in it. We're trying to help improve policy and decision making through research and analysis, because we recognize that even the best data and the best historical lessons and the best analytical techniques and so on aren't necessarily going to capture all of the important considerations or factors, and so people have to use their own experience and judgment. But your the thrust of your question, I think, is apt. There's a lot of information available, but how much of it is sound, unbiased? That's a big question mark. And
well, most of Americans admit they're getting their information from the television, the radio, and in publications published on the internet. And as you know, for every bad study that says one thing, there's 5 bad studies that say another thing. So in an environment like that, what can we do? Now, I would say go to RAND Corporation, because you've got nonpartisan and empirically proven research. But I really am worried. I'm worried that the very fabric of democracy is breaking down because the voters themselves are not making fact-based decisions and choices.
Not only that, but a relatively small slice of our citizenry are actually voting. We have only a fraction of the eligible voters registering to vote, and then only a fraction, sometimes a very small percentage of the registered voters participating in elections.
And the media is so polarized. If they're getting their information from the media, then, what kind of voting information is that? You can see I'm concerned.
So am I, and so are a lot of people, but it's one of the things that I think makes us at RAND more determined in what we do. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how to ensure that our work is nonpartisan, rigorous, objective, and that our dissemination is fair and balanced as well. So I like to say now the work is nonpartisan and the dissemination is strictly bipartisan, because often you can undermine the appearance of objectivity by tilting in one direction in the way that we disseminate the work. And so we try to be balanced in everything we do. But it starts with a statement of aspirations that we need to be objective and rigorous. We're then very careful in the way we hire and evaluate the talent that we use, our research and the key support staff. We then have balance in the oversight mechanisms. Our trustees come from all walks of life, all parts of the political spectrum, so that's important. We subject all of our research to peer review, technical review, so that the work is bulletproof.
But what we really need is RAND on television. We need RAND on the radio. We need you, Mr. Rich, to do a drive time radio program, to go on the air on television, because if the think tanks don't begin to leverage mass media, then we really are leaving it up to polarized hosts and news bureaus.
Well, in the meantime, all of our
will you do it?
All of our I'm happy to
let me put you on the spot.
I'm happy to come back whenever you invite me. But in the meantime, people can access all of our work on RAND.org. And I really encourage people to look through our newsletters and alerts and read the RAND blog. We're on social media, and we'd like to hear from people as well. One of the keys to objectivity, I think, is exposure. So we believe in publishing our results and disseminating it widely. I think people
Can you
who
give
use
your
it
website out to our audience today?
Sure. It's very simple. It's www.rand.org, O-R-G, the nonprofit suffix, so rand.org. And as I say, there's thousands of documents on a wide variety of subjects, and people can read the actual research products themselves, the reports. They're often long, detailed documentation, but there's a lot of summaries, abstracts, and smaller briefs that people can skim and decide whether or not they want to dive in.
Well, that is our program for today, and I would love to have you back, and I hope you will think about a television and radio program and leveraging the mass media so that we can get more of RAND's research out there into the public. But before we say goodbye to you, I do want to take this opportunity to thank you for bringing more facts to light. Thank you, Mr. Rich.
Thank you.
If your station is leaving us after this hour and you have a question or a comment to make about today's program, you can email me at RebeccaCosta.com or send me a note on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We're all over the internet. And let me know what you thought about our conversation with Mr. Rich today. And if you missed the full interview with Rich or any of our other guests, remember you can download previous episodes of the Costa Report from our website, Apple, iTunes, Podbean, and our new YouTube channel. I really want to clue you in that next week we have an amazing guest who you're not going to want to miss. George Pataki will be with us to talk about how he's joined forces with Governor Andrew Cuomo to cut $2 billion. That's billion with a B in taxes this year. What happens when two former adversaries come together to lower taxes? Well, you can find out next week right here on the only news program which puts policy ahead of politics. Now stay tuned for another hour of Straight Talk Radio. You're listening to the Costa Report.